This is an example of how to solve the example related to aggression after watching football that was demonstrated on the whiteboard in all of its full form. So here I'm simply showing you how to do those very same processes in Excel. And I hope that you'll find this a helpful demonstration. I won't be doing all of the 5 steps. All I'll be doing is showing you the calculations in this video. To see all of the 5 steps, please watch the other little video that has all of the steps gone through. So the first thing we had to do was to record the basic info from the problem. I pulled this mean score 14.3 out of the problem as it was described. And N, I could count, there are 5 scores here, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Degrees of freedom I know is N minus 1. I'll type in the formula beginning with the equal sign. The N in this case is 5. I can just type it in, minus 1, and that equals 4. We could have just done that in our heads, but I'll continue to show you. The next thing we have to do in our basic info is get the sum of all of these values. And I will go ahead and type a formula. I'll start with the equal sign and I'll tell Excel that I want to do a sum. I put the opening parenthesis to show what it is. Excel asks me, what do you want to sum? I want to sum the data in cells B6 through B10. I can write that out, B6, put a colon through B10, and I get the sum of 95. Or I could also do it by writing equals sum. And I could just select those cells, place my cursor in the top cell and keep it there, and then just drag downward to the end of the range. And you'll see that Excel filled in those values for me up in the formula bar. I can just hit enter. And again, we get 95. Or I could do it just by taking equals and click in the first cell, B6 plus B7 plus B25 plus B14 plus B17. You can see all these written up here, and I could hit enter, and again, I get 95. Any of those ways are acceptable. The mean, as we know, is just the sum of all those scores, which we've just calculated, divided by N. So we can do it like equals, and we could write the number that's in C15 equals C15 divided by that diagonal sign. And I can write N, which is C13, and hit enter. We find out the mean is 19. Or I could go my equal sign and click in the cell that has the value I want to divide by, or the sum, and divide by, and click in the cell that has N, and it'll write those cells in for me. And either of those 2 ways would probably be the best way to do it. Now, the next step that I do is I typically go ahead and write this mean in. Write the mean in this whole column. So I write it in the top row. Then I select out of the cell and select back into it until I have the green box around the cell I want to copy. And now I copy it and paste it. What we can't do, we can do it in a roundabout way that I won't show you now. But if I was just to copy this right here, copy and paste, I'm going to hit paste now. You'll see what happens. It thinks we want to calculate a formula and there aren't numbers in there. What it copies and pastes is the value. It copies and pastes the formula, and we actually want the value. So it won't work to do it that way. We could do a copy and paste like this. We could copy the mean, and then we could select the cells we want to paste it into. We could right click and click on this 1, 2, 3, which is just the values, and we'll get the 19. But because all of those things might be a little more advanced, the way you probably want to do it at this point is just to type in the 19, and just so you don't get yourself confused, click in it, copy it till it has that spinning ring around it, and paste it down. Now, the fact that we paste formulas is why Excel is so valuable, because now we have to calculate the deviations. Remember, x minus m is the deviations. So we'll type the equal sign. We can look up in the formula bar here. And what do we want to subtract? Well, we want all of the scores, x minus the mean. And so now we have this written out here. You can see the cells that are subtracting. It looks right. The pink, we're taking B6, which is the blue, and we're subtracting C6, which is the pink. It looks correct. Let's hit enter. -1, that's true. 18 minus 19 is -1. Now we can just copy that formula. So now you can see I've clicked back in that cell. It's now within the green box. I hit copy, and there is the green box with the spinning bar around it, and I paste it down. Now I can just paste it. And now we have all of those calculations done. Now we have all the deviations. Now we have to get the squared deviations, because sum of squares is the sum of squared deviations. So let's get the squared deviations. We can type equals, and we could type, place our cursor into the cell we want to start with, which is D6. And we could use the asterisk, which means multiply. It's the uppercase of 8, of the number 8 on your keyboard. And we could type D6 again, and we get 1. And that's correct. Or we could do it this way. We could type equals. Here's the equals in the formula bar. And we could use the abbreviation SQRT. And that means square root. But we don't want square root. We want the square. So we wouldn't want to do square root. We just would want to do equals, and we'll click in that D6 cell. And then we'll just use this caret, which is the uppercase of the number 6 on your keyboard. And if we'll say it like up to or squared, so that's the formula for that. We'll tip enter, and we still get 1. We'll see if this works for all the numbers. So I'm going to copy those 2 cells now. I'm hitting copy. I use Control C in that case. And I'm going to select the next 4 rows, those same 2 columns. And I'm going to hit paste. I'll use Control V. And we can see they both worked exactly the same way. Each row, they squared the values over here. We don't need both of them, so I'm just going to erase these to avoid confusion, but that is the squared deviations. And so then, of course, SS right here is simply the sum of squared deviations. So we're going to type equals sum, type our opening parenthesis, you can see up in the formula bar, and let's just tell it, let's just grab the range that we wanted to sum. It begins in B6. I'm holding my mouse button down, and I'm highlighting that range until that vibrating line is around all of it, and I can hit enter. The sum of squares is 70. Now is the only place where we're estimating. Everything we've done so far is the same way as calculating standard deviation, and now we're going to estimate the variance, I should say, for the population. And we're going to do that by dividing by degrees of freedom instead of by n. And so let's go right here and type equals. Here's our sum of squares, 70. I'll click in it, C18. You can see it up here in the formula bar. Let's say divided by, and now we divide by degrees of freedom, which allows us to have an unbiased estimate of that variance. And that's it. 17.5 is our estimated variance. Now remember, this variance is for sample sizes n equals 1. We have sample size n equals 5, so now we have to calculate the variance for the distribution of means and then the standard deviation for the distribution of means. So to calculate the variance for the distribution of means, we just take the variance and divide by n. So here is our variance, our estimated variance. I'll click in that cell, and we'll divide by n, which is up here. We're not estimating anymore, we're calculating. So we divide by n, and we get 3.5, that's the variance. And the square root of the variance is the standard deviation for the distribution of means. So equals square root. And what do we want the square root of? Of that variance for the distribution of means. We'll type enter, and that is the figure we need. So this would all be for step 2. And the last thing we do is we figure out the t-score. So I've written down the formulas here. The first thing we do is we take m, the sample mean, minus the population mean. So let's find the sample mean. Here it is, m, 19. And let's subtract, the population mean, which is this 14.3. We can click in our formula. We see this looks good. So there we go. That is the start. And the next thing we do is we take that figure and divide by the standard deviation for the distribution of means. There's my equal sign. I want the data that's linked to m minus mu, which is right here. And we divide by the standard deviation for the distribution of means. And we find out that our t-score is 2.512256. We could shorten that to 2.51. We know that our cutoff point is 2.13. And since this 2.51 is greater than 2.13, we would reject the null hypothesis. That's the end of this demonstration.